Good. Okay, on that note, thank you very much. And I'll now hand over to the director of the Muslim Institute, Hassan Mahamdali, who will formally introduce our speakers and this evening's event. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for coming tonight. I just want to give you just a little overview of the structure of this evening, and before I go on to introduce our two speakers who are going to be in conversation. We have Ziauddin Sardar and Yasmin Alibhai-Brown, and they're going to have an in-conversation about Zia's new book, Three Begums, The Women Who Shaped My Life. And after that, there'll be a chance for everyone to ask questions and make contributions. Then we'll have a short break, and then we're going to have a second launch of a book tonight, which is the latest volume of Critical Muslim themed on water. Every issue of Critical Muslim is themed differently. This one is water. So we're going to do that after a short comfort break. And just to say that Hurst Publishers have a bookstore at the back with Critical Muslim and also Zia's new book. Critical Muslim is on sale for £12 and Zia's is on sale for £10 just for tonight. So let me introduce our first two speakers who are going to be in conversation. Professor Ziauddin Sardar is an internationally renowned writer, scholar, futurist and cultural critic, and a founding member and former chair of the Muslim Institute. He's author of over 60 books, including 2 volumes of highly acclaimed autobiography, Desperately Seeking Paradise, Journeys of a Skeptical Muslim, and Balti Britain, a provocative journey through Asian Britain. Reading the Quran, Mecca the Sacred City, and the international bestseller, which seems very apposite in these times, Why Do People Hate America? His latest books are A Person of Pakistani Origins and the book we're going to be discussing tonight, Three Begums, The Women Who Shaped My Life. Zia is a former professor of law and society at Middlesex University and a columnist in New Statesman. He's director of the Centre for Post-Normal Policy and Future Studies and director of the International Institute of Future Studies at the International Islamic University, Malaysia. And he's also editor of the influential quarterly Critical Muslim. Yasmin Alibhai-Brown was born in Uganda. Yasmin gained a first-class degree in English literature from Makerere University in 1972, which is the same year that she was exiled from her birthplace. She holds an MPhil in literature from the University of Oxford. Yasmin is known as a journalist, a broadcaster, an author and a columnist. Yasmin's several awards include the Orwell Prize for Political Writing and a National Press Award Columnist of the Year in 2017. In the New Year's Honours list in 2001, Yasmin was appointed a member of the Order of the British Empire, an MBE, for services to journalism, and in 2003, Yasmin returned the award, writing that her decision was partly in protest at the Labour government, particularly its war on Iraq. Yasmin has 8 honorary degrees and was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature in 2022. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Yasmin.
Yeah, I didn't know you were so prominent.
What did you think I was then? You just never see my talent because you've been the louder, more successful one. Actually, I didn't know because I was a professor until December at Middlesex.
You were, yes. Yes.
I didn't know this.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've been friends for a very, very long time. Accidental friends. It was the Salman Rushdie crisis that brought us together in a very strange and interesting way. We won't go into that. Maybe if you want to ask later. And that was almost 35 years ago. So I'm extremely pleased to be asked to do this. And especially as this book is so different from many of the books, most of the books Zia has written, and I'll come to that. But I want to start on a very personal note, because this book really reveals something to me. He's always so brusque and loud and domineering, and you begin to think, God, this man is macho. But you know, if you want to have a definition of a feminist Muslim man, this is him. Because this masculinity is there Nobody can avoid it or deny it. But throughout the years I've known him, he has always valued, in spite of fighting with me a lot, and I'm fighting with his wife, fighting with Merryl, I'm sure, and probably fighting with his mum, he always valued the female spirit, the voice, the female capacity for warmth, the female sensibility, the female heart, and the female brain. And this is a rare thing in men, whoever they are. And I've always sensed that, this combination of the very masculine man, tempered and made by a genuine, I think, respect and love of women and girls. And that's very special, I think. And it's the way forward if we want to create a better world for all of us. So yes, he is a feminist man. And this book in particular, I mean, I thought his essay in the whole issue of Critical Muslim after Saliha's death was extraordinary. And I'd read about the marriage and all of that in his autobiographies before. But I think this is slightly different, Zia. I think it's awakened me to so many things, I think. To the pricelessness of a mother. We always say we love our mothers. And I'm very old, but I still miss my mother every day of my life. Because without her, I would not have survived a very difficult family life. But here you get it's more than us all loving our mothers. It is actually it's like he's got this beautiful sari and he's pulled out every gold thread and looked at it and made us look at it and gave it meaning. And I just wanted to ask you about the first Begum in your life then. None of this seems fake or false to me. She's obviously a deep, deep part of who you are and was of your collective lives. And the book is full of how different and how extraordinary she was. But what are the two things that stand out for you in your mother that you feel made you most of all?
Determination. She was very, very determined. And if she decided to have something, she would have it. It doesn't matter what hurdles you put in front of her, what you argue. If she's decided that she wants to do something, she would do it, in a sense. She would argue maybe it's not the best thing, but if she's determined that is the right thing to do, then she will do it. Full stop.
Like sending how many people on Hajj?
Yeah, as many as she could. I mean, in that case, I think she did 5 or 6 people. If she decided to do something, she would do it. And then you said, you've seen me in a very aggressive moods.
Oh,
right?
yes.
So I need to point out here something. If you are debating people who often tend to be very aggressive and male, as we have done, like in the case of Rushdie, for example, where I had to be very aggressive, not just with him, but with the chairperson who was on his side, right? And whatever her female's name was, they were also on his side, and it was a setup where you and I were there to be humiliated. I would not allow them to be humiliated, right? So we killed them. We destroyed them.
Say things like that.
We destroyed them.
Everywhere.
we totally destroyed them, right? In a sense. Now, so I would not say I'm a feminist in that sense. I am somebody with feminine in me, right? If you ask Merryl was totally against feminism, and I tell you one of the reasons. If she was alive, she would say, "I'm not a feminist because show me a feminist who weeps for Gaza. Then I will become feminist. Show me a feminist who stands up and says this is genocide. Then I'll be a feminist."
But she's wrong. She was wrong because there are so many feminists who do that. No, I don't think feminism can be dismissed. I am a feminist.
Yeah, I know you are.
I know you are.
I know.
Okay. And a proud one. Okay. See, this is what happens. This is what always happens.
We've had this debate. I think every man needs some feminine in him to basically humanize and make him whole.
Yeah.
But it's not necessary to accept first, second, or third wave of feminism. In that sense. It's not necessary because you can be a wonderful human being, a holistic human being.
No, but the feminism isn't about being
appreciate whatever you want to appreciate without subscribing to an ideology that keeps changing and becoming quite aggressive on its own right.
Like your analysis of Islam keeps changing and growing and making us think. And I would argue that a lot of your early work, certainly the ones I'm familiar with, where you said over and over and over again, Islam gives rights to women. That's feminism. That's not the feminine in you.
That's truth.
No, but that's feminism. Telling people it is about the rights women have, the equality they must have.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All right.
I win this one.
All right.
And now.
You're on a slippery slope here, you do realize.
No.
Carry on.
But in terms of your mum, you said she was very determined.
Yeah. And I think it was the determination that I've acquired from her. There's certain times you find yourself in a place where you have to come out fighting as an intellectual, right? And we've done that. I mean, I remember we were in some, maybe a book festival in Edinburgh or somewhere where two of us together, where we had to come fight because there were clearly people there were saying, who are these Muslims and what are they doing here? And so you had to stand up and put them in their place. And I do that, and I can do that very effectively because I'm not, afraid in any sense. But that doesn't mean that I am not for equality or for feminine thought.
But in terms of your mum's determination, did she do it in a way that kind of pulled you in rather than
No, she was very gentle. Her determination was totally different than mine.
Okay.
But I only learned determination from her, but not the technique that she used. I think that her technique was too sophisticated for me, and it required lots of cunning, maneuvering, going this way, going that way. It wasn't quite like that. My technique is, okay, this is a target, get it.
And what was the other thing that is most important in her personality and her influence?
Oh, it's love. I mean, she, so many times, even when she was suffering from dementia, and we would take her out for a walk, and she'll see some child or something, she'll cross the road and hug the child. I mean, she had this kind of, the chapter begins by saying they're mothers and they're universal mothers, and she was very much a universal mother in the sense that she wanted to mother everything, and that just poured out of her. There was nothing you could hold, and anybody who saw her would immediately see how loving she was in that sense. But I must tell you, I think this incident is in the book. She would also tolerate certain things. So one day we were sitting there, and she was sitting, and somebody knocked on the door. My wife opened the door, and it was a group of Tablighi Jamaat people.
Oh, yes.
They came in, and my wife invited them, please, her, and made tea for them, and they sat down, and they were very polite, and they had tea, and then my mother sat there, and my wife, and then we started conversation. First of all said, do you people know how to do wudu, ablution? And we said, yes, I think we have a good idea. And they said, do you know how to pray? And we said, yes. My mother said, yes, I think I've taught my children, yeah. And then they said, well, our women, right?
Yes, I read, yes.
Our women, they're not, they want to have careers, they want to go outside,
properly.
they are not dressing properly. And her face turned red, literally red. She said, Urdu mein, nikalo unko bahar, throw them out, right? Just like that in Urdu. Right? And then I just got up and said, Bhai sahab, aap jaiye. Brothers, Bhai sahab, you better leave. So they left. So she could be very, very kind of strong as well. But her determination was very planned. She knew what she wanted. She knew how to maneuver. For example, if she knew that she couldn't get anything out of me or out of my wife. She knew how to go to my daughter, and she will then play a role, right? It'd be all kind of very Machiavellian in many ways, right? But in
Tell
the
us
end,
about the gate.
but in the, oh yes, so there was what happened when they became old. My parents, I moved them to Colindale, where I live, and we were fortunate enough there was a house being sold right behind us, so we managed to buy that, and they moved there, and our gardens connected. They connect to this day. And the first thing she said, "Oh, that's very interesting. We can have a gate, which now we have, but in those days we didn't. We can have a gate, and we can come down. The two houses could connect." But Saliha, my wife, said, "Nope. No, it cannot be, because if she came through this way, she will be in our kitchen and dominating that in no way." The most interesting thing is that even if he wasn't in the kitchen, she was in the living room, she'd still be dominating it in a way, right? Just her very presence, people will be looking around. So she was quite determined in that sense. And I think two things stand out for her: determination, and if you look at her life, right? She kind of married very young, then she had to migrate from India to Pakistan in very difficult circumstances, where they just managed to survive. And when they were in Pakistan, they didn't do very well. We were exceptionally poor. She stayed in a house where I think her brothers and sisters got all kinds of disease. It was a very bad house.
Oh gosh, yes, that's a
very
terrifying bit.
Very bad. And then she eventually kind of came to England, totally kind of in totally different world, cannot speak a word of English, right? And then we lived in kind of Hilsey Street in Hackney, very racist and very poor kind of place. And she got up in the morning in the freezing cold to go to a factory to make sure that, I don't know whether that incident is there or not, but I asked for a bus fare, and she didn't have a bus fare to give me. And then I said, why did you have me, why was I born if you couldn't look after me, some silly thing like that. And she slapped me, and the only time she ever slapped me, right, is when she couldn't give me whatever it was in those days for 38 bus to go somewhere. And you could see that she succeeded, and her whole thing was what she didn't have was education, so her children would definitely have education. So there was a major emphasis on all that. So you can see the determination. But you know what? I don't just think it's my mother. I think the whole kind of Asian, I'm talking about Asian, I'm not just talking about Muslim, I'm talking about Asian, Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Sri Lankan women who came here in the 50s and 60s, worked very, very hard, and really kind of what we see now is their hard work. If you switch on a channel, Sky News, and you see, so many Asian faces, or the BBC, or you go to courts and you see so many, Asian barristers. It is their hard work that we are seeing. So it was not just. There's a whole generation of women who are very determined.
Yeah,
very
my mother
loving.
was the same. She would say, "Just get yourself an education, because nobody can steal that from you.
Yeah.
They can steal everything,
Yeah.
but they can't steal your education."
Yeah.
But this is also true of Africans living here in Africa. The whole pressure and push towards education is such an immigrant imperative, isn't it? And thank God for it, really.
Yeah.
And the funny about your mother, you've been very open at the same time quite delicate about the relationship between her and Saliha, about the two women, very different women, but very sort of determined women, and having to negotiate with each other. So when we come to the third part, maybe we can go into that. But now we come to Merryl, so your mother, I think, kind of obviously made you, as many of our mothers have, as you've just said. Merryl was your intellectual other half.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely. Without Merryl, I'd probably be talking to walls and not getting very far. She was the one who would be the first person to say, "This is rubbish. Actually, she will always begin by saying, you can do better than this is rubbish. Right? But without her criticism, I would not be able to write. I was reflecting on that only the other day, and I think Merrill would have written much more than she has. She certainly wanted to write a kind of history of the Indian Ocean world, which was her obsession, and she only managed to write the introduction. Largely because she seemed to be more interested in my writing than in her, right, her own. And one of the most kind of difficult things I've written, and that's in the earlier book, A Person of Pakistani Origin, a chapter called Dilip Kumar Made Me Do It. And it was commissioned by my friend Ashish Nandi, the celebrated Indian intellectual. He was writing a book. In fact, the book is called A Secret History of Our Desires. It's about Indian cinema. It's kind of almost like a theoretical textbook. And we were living in Kuala Lumpur, and we had a flat, and strict, you are not coming in my area, and I'm not going to go in your area, and all your smoking is all there, and all my cigars are here, and all her objects are there, and all sorts of differentiate. But there was a table and a kind of typewriter, old-fashioned BBC type computer there on which we wrote, and she just would not let me write. So I'll secretly watch the films on video, right? And I thought, well, she's from Welsh, for God's sake, what does she know about Urdu, right? Or in the she will watch it as well. And when I'm writing, she's just standing there laughing at the behind. I'm writing like that, she's standing there laughing. Hey, no, you don't even know your own culture, right? So she constantly, it's about 20, 30,000 word long essay. It took me like 9 months to do because of her interference. I would have been able to do very, very quickly. But it's probably far, far better than if I had just knocked it off in a few months. Very interesting. At the same time, I was doing a book on postmodernism. In fact, what had happened was my friend Richard Apeniesi, who's a great kind of polymath critic, art historian, who used to edit Begums series, which became introducing series later on, and so he wanted to do postmodernism, introducing postmodernism himself, but got stuck. So he said, "Can you rescue me and do the last 50 pages of the book?" And I said, yes, I'll rescue you and do the last page of the book, which I took to Kuala Lumpur with me. Right? I sat down to do it, and I thought she's going to interfere. No, she's remotely not interested. Right? But Indian films, Bollywood, that, I just knocked it off in 3 weeks and posted it, and it was all done, and it came about. Afterwards, when she read it, she says, "What? You described Nusrat Fatehullah Khan as an ordinary qawwali? Have you actually read any of these qawwalis?" Right? And she really can. And I said, "Oh, but had she advised me, it would be a much better book, but I would never have finished it."
Yeah. So it was kind of a yin-yang.
It was kind of yin-yang, yes. It was, but it's essential because she made me an intellectual whole, I think. Without her comments and without her constant feeds, I certainly would not have written so much as I have done, and some of the stuff is pretty good, and I think it's partly to her. Yeah.
The book, when I first came upon both of you properly, was The Distorted Imagination.
Yeah.
Which I know was very hastily written in response to but I still quote from it. There is so much still to quote from. I don't know, has anybody here seen this book, read this book? It was a response to the Rushdie crisis, and in particular, the liberal hysteria that followed. Not the publication of the book so much, or the demonstrations in Bradford, which were completely legal, but the fatwa. And then suddenly, Muslims in particular, realizing that, hey, these guys were all supposed to be on our side. They welcomed multiracial Britain, they loved our films and our books, and And actually, it was latent within them. It just took this.
Yeah, just little scratch.
But it's a fantastic book because you've quoted Ashish Nandi in it, but somehow challenging the left is one of the hardest things to do when it comes to complex societies and intercultural countries, because there's a kind of pattern that all the bad guys are on the right, and the bad guys are on the right. I mean,
not always.
No, for me, the bad guys are on the right, but so are so many who presume to be.
Yeah. It was a big shock.
And it was a very difficult time.
Yeah.
It was a very, very difficult time. Interestingly, I was at the Statesman then.
Yeah.
And I'd never said to anyone, because I wasn't a very good Muslim, and I'm still not, but I didn't think it was anybody's business anyway, that my faith was my business. But our editor then, Stuart Weir, who died a couple of months ago, issued this edict in a left-wing magazine. We are not going to cover anyone, the arguments against the book by Muslims. We're not going to have anybody write and explain why Muslims are angry. So I looked at him, I said, what kind of free expression is this, Stuart?
Yeah.
I'm a Muslim, what do you mean? And he said, oh, I didn't know you were. I said, well, you didn't need to know. But if you're going to cover week after week why Muslims are wrong, then surely you have a duty to also listen to why they're upset.
Yeah.
And in the end, he commissioned, after a long battle, Bhikkhu Parikh's rather beautiful essay on the value of the sacred.
Yeah.
But I was so disgusted that I left the magazine. It was my second ever job in journalism. And I wrote about this, and he got in touch with me and said, I'm sure I didn't do that. I said, actually, Stuart, you did. You were so awful.
Yeah.
It came very naturally to you, I said.
You know, he lived in Hackney, and he was also my friend.
Oh, I don't care.
He's also my friend, and I approached him doing a piece, and in fact, I think he commissioned it and then rang me to say, no, we decided against it.
Anyway, that was a very volatile time.
Yeah.
I remember being with my husband at a dinner table and people walking out because we wouldn't agree with them that, these Muslims were evil and clash of civilizations. It was a really, but this book, which is still so relevant,
it's being republished, by the way.
Is it? I was just going to say.
Yeah, it's being republished
I think it needs to be
by a young publisher who may or may not be here. Salik, are you here?
Because I think younger people who know nothing about that important juncture in our collective histories here. And then the postmodernism, which I knew nothing about. I didn't even know what the term meant.
Yeah.
And then all the very wide range of books that you've published. Among them, which are the themes that meant most to you and which you feel Merryl helped you to really communicate?
Well, the story animation was written by us together. It was a very difficult, because it was first book. Everything was very emotional. Writing was very hard. She had a manual typewriter. I had one of those, I think, Olivetti type thing. Getting the manuscript together, it was very, very difficult. And the history of the book, we thought we could get it published very easily. Lots of people. I knew lots of people in, Penguin, Weidenfeld, and we had an old publisher in Castle. Mansell's, who published my earlier books and all that, and none of them would take it. I mean, it was just so. Eventually, it was published by my publisher, Mansell, Grey Seal, which was John Duncan. So John Duncan saw the book and he said, "This has to be published," and he left Castle. just to publish that book. And he was a Red Indian, and his real name was Grey Seal.
Oh.
That's why the imprint is called Grey Seal.
Okay.
And the tragedy is that after publishing that book, 3-4 years later, his wife died suddenly. She went to hospital for something simple and had a toxic shock and died. And John Duncan never recovered after that. He was totally distraught. Nothing could kind of bring him back to his self.
So would you say that book was the beginning of your connection, intellectual connection with Merrill?
Yeah. Then she wrote another book which I helped write, Knowing One Another, the anthropology book. And amongst the books that we enjoyed writing together was the American trilogy. We did Why Do People Hate America? Now, interestingly enough, it was Merrill who said, Why Do People Hate America should be a film book. So it's actually, it looks at America through films, Shane and TV series. So I did the TV stuff, she did the film, and we really enjoyed it. It was, I wrote the last chapter because she was very pessimistic. I thought we need to be a bit more optimistic. Then we wrote another book called, in the United States, it was called American Terminator. In the British edition, it's called American Dreams, The Global Nightmare. Which is also partly a film book, which I wrote half of and she wrote quite the other half. And the last book, Will America Change, she wrote mostly of. She wouldn't let me in. She said, no, you had your say in that. So I only wrote about 20% of that, 20-30%. She wrote most of that. And that's probably the fastest book she wrote. She was not a very fast writer, unlike me. I can write fast. She was quite slow. So, but she wrote that quite fast.
It's really interesting because I reread the second book because I was writing a column about 3 weeks ago after all this Trump business. I said, it's only you guys here in the West, in Europe and Britain, who've been dreamy about America and the greatness of America and the leader of the free world. Those of us who come from the South and the East have known for centuries, not centuries, decades, the damage America constantly did, particularly after independence. The CIA were like cockroaches everywhere in independent countries. And I wrote this, that, Idi Amin, everybody tells me, what a bad man. I said, who put him in? Who put him into power? Israel, US and UK, because this was the Cold War. I even have a picture of Moshe Dayan handing Idi Amin a gun. And I'm speaking about it as, there's a new book called The Dictators, where I've written a chapter. But I said, you guys were silly and duped into falling for the American dream. African Americans never could afford to believe in it. Those of us from the South, and we had, the editor said, it was the most popular column I've ever written. And so I reread that.
American Dream, Global Nightmare.
Yeah. So, it's just all recycles, doesn't it?
Yeah.
She died a very horrible death, which I didn't even know. I mean, I knew, you told me, Merrill died, but I had no idea, so thank you for capturing it in this book. But till the very end, her spirit was still there. She was totally engaged.
Yeah. So she was in a hospital. They just gave her oxygen. And so my young assistant, Scott, went to see her. And when he went to her, she's supposed to be in her room in the hospital. She wasn't there, so he got worried. So he started looking. Eventually, he found her standing outside the hospital with the oxygen tent next to her, smoking a cigarette. Right? And he says, Merrill, don't you know what you're doing? This is oxygen. You're going to be blown up. Oh, she said, is it really? Oh, thank you for telling me. Would you like to take me inside? So he took her inside. He took her inside. And 4 days before she died, the Anwar Ibrahim, the current Prime Minister, he was then leader of opposition, came to see her. And he said, Merryl, you've got to stop. You've got to stop smoking. She said, yeah, let's think about it. So,
which was the best she'd ever said, because until then she would never agree.
Yeah, that was true. That was the best she ever said. So, yeah, no, she said, I mean, one of the most common quote was, there can never be enough ashtrays in a house. So.
Do you still miss her?
Oh, very much, very, very much, very much, especially when I'm trying to write something, because when you get, I mean, you know, you run out of ideas, or you've written you think you've written something quite literally, you know, but you need somebody to kind of look at it, and you're not quite sure whether it has any quality in it or not, or is, you know. And that she was always there, but she's not there now. So writing has become harder because of her absence. It has also become quicker, but it has also become harder because she's not kind of leaning there, just, you know, making rude comments and all that. Sure. And part of our fun was that she used to make rude comments about me, and I'll make rude comments about her. Yeah, everybody will be very upset. Oh, how can you be so rude? But in fact, we had our own language. We had developed a whole language, which.
She called you?
Chapu.
Chapu. What does that mean?
Chap.
Oh, I see. Chapu.
Yeah, okay. She called me Chapu. So, and she had she had a funny name for all of my kids and friends, and everybody had. Some of the names have stuck, and I like to give people names as well. So they've stuck as well. So there was quite, and we could say almost anything to each other in front of anybody, and we will understand what we are saying, even if we were saying very rude things about the person who's standing in front of us, which we frequently were. Yeah.
So to come to your final Begum.
Yeah.
Well, all of us who knew her know exactly what you mean. But there were some very moving things. You can see how many things I've pasted. There were so many things that stuck out for me. But when you said, I was always in love with her, before I met her, perhaps before I was born. I thought that was very moving.
Yeah, there is, you know, in traditional kind of cultures, when they arrange marriage, the first thing is, oh, you don't know each other. In that sense, and the basic argument, which I never bought, by the way, when I was young, is that actually the love grows. You know, it's not always the love at first sight. It grows if you give and take and all that. And I never believed that, but I got married in that sort of situation, and it really did grow for me. It really did grow, and as I came to know her more and more, I began to appreciate her more. I mean, first of all, I just saw her as a physical beauty, but then when I grew her, I saw a kind of very deep beauty in her, and sometimes that beauty would be just a glance, and sometimes it'd be just silence. To this day, my children, probably sitting here, do not realize or understand how much we communicated with each other without saying anything, and how much we communicated with each other with a note, I'm going to pick this up when we are in bed. You see, I'm not going to say anything now. I mean, it was very common because during the 80s and 90s, I had a whole group of intellectuals. We call ourselves the Ijmalis, the beautiful ones, and we will gather in the house, talk about all sorts of things, and she'll be part of it, but she will never say anything, right? She'll be, I mean, a lot of discussions, mostly Merryl, you know, Merryl, we're talking about being loud. Merryl could be very, very loud, as you probably know, and very dominating, by the way, especially when she's arguing something, she'll be very dominating. And that it will be at night when we're in bed, she'll say, how could you say that? You know, kya badtamizi thi, right? You know, how stupid you are, something like. And all the discussion will take place there. All the criticism will come out there, and some of it will be very harsh as well. It's not. There are two things she would not tolerate.
Religion.
Yeah, you cannot criticize Islam, and you cannot criticize Pakistan.
Yes, I remember that.
Yes.
I was there when she warned you.
Yeah.
I was there.
Yeah, you couldn't, but you can imagine that in our Ijmali discussions, most of the criticism was against Islam. And that she got quite upset about it, but she would not reveal it there. She would reveal it later and just kind of hold it. So that was the two things that she would never allow. And she also liked Imran Khan, and you couldn't criticize Imran Khan for a long time. Yeah.
But the thing about her also was, like you said, she was an absolutely amazing cook. Colin and I still remember her shami kebabs and stuff. But that she then created this career, this professional life, and these friendships, which belonged entirely to her.
Yeah, they were very, very deep and belonged to her, and we didn't know anything about her.
And I thought that was such an interesting independance that she kind of created for herself, which even I didn't know. I mean, she'd occasionally talk about it, but it was only when she died that I heard about her work in the school, her friendship with, somebody who was from a completely different background, her best friend.
Yeah.
And her kind of extraordinary generosity and the fun. She was such fun. But I was very, very struck by, it was just it's an unforgettable scene, the night you got married, Pehli Raat. It was so beautiful because she wasn't shy.
Yeah.
The way you write it.
Yeah.
She wasn't hiding, waiting.
No.
I thought that was astonishing, and for you to have written it was beautiful, actually. It was very, I felt like breaking into a song, a Bollywood song, reading it,
Yeah.
So tell me about now how much time has gone by. Do you still feel she's with you?
Yes, very, very much. Not just Saliha, but Merryl and my mother. In a sense, I carry them with me, and I have to admit, I project them on my daughter.
No, don't say anything about her. I'm coming to your daughter. We're coming to that.
You see, you're always trying to undercut me. That's the problem.
I know. That's why you're not married to me.
That's why we have to defend ourselves. I do, and essentially they are part of me. If I forget any one of them, then I am less of a human being than I would be with all of them. I mean, they essentially shaped my outlook.
And now I come to Maha.
Yeah.
I wanted to come to her before you do your reading.
Yeah.
That she's definitely the fourth woman who has been inextricably, I can't say the word, bound to you in a very special way.
Yeah, because she was the first child, and I kind of delivered her and I carried her along. I used to call her Dunya when she was young, which means the world. So she was my world in that sense. The boys didn't get that much attention as she got. So the boys have the right to be upset, I suppose, right? But she yes, in that sense. And I do project some of what I miss about my mother, my wife, even about Merryl. I mean, Merryl and Maha were very close together, right? They were when Merryl will come, and it was very strange. Merryl will come. She's a 60, 65-year-old woman. She comes along, sits on a sofa, and Maha Sardar, who is like 35, 40-year-old woman, she comes and sits on her lap. Right, and they're just talking each other, and she's curling her hair. So it was quite strange, but I could see how much love and affection she had for her. And when Merryl came, it was quite interesting. She'll ring the bell, and it doesn't matter who opened the door, whether I opened the door, and she'll shout, "Saliha!" And Begum will always be in the kitchen, and she'll say, "Merryl, here!" in the kitchen, and she'll go straight there, and they have a little natter, and it would always be how awful I am, and she'll ask what injustice I have committed on her in the last time, since etc., etc. They'll have a little natter, and then Merrill will pay attention to me or anybody else, unless it was Maha. If Maha was open the door, then she say Maharwa, and Saliha shout like that, and then there's a communication between and all the men will be out of the community. It was their own kind of little word that they had.
So Saliha never was jealous of the time and intellectual kind of electricity between you and Merrill?
No.
Never?
No. I mean, I think she appreciated, she knew what we were about in that sense. She would get upset when sometimes, because I worked in the attic, and me and Merrill will literally be shouting at each other, and she'll get very upset, and she'll get concerned. She'll come up and say, "Is everything all right?" We did have shouting matches when we wrote certain things. For example, if you look at the last chapter of Distorted Imagination, I think it's called The End of Civilization or something like that. And it's basically written by me. And I would say it's almost inspired, but it would have been totally different had I given in. Not given in to Merrill. Merrill wanted it in a completely different way. And I knew that it had to be like that. So I stood my ground. She would not give up. And she was just shouting and screaming, "No, I will not allow that. It has to be done in a different way." Right? It's going against the grain of the book, or all sorts of stuff like that. And we had very, very kind of strong differences of opinion. But in the end, maybe I won because I'm a man, I don't know. But I don't think Merrill ever gave up to anybody. But maybe it was John Duncan who said, it was his words, "This is inspired." That the last chapter, this is purely inspired. The rest is argued and far, but this is, and that's why I think she accepted it in a sense. But I do remember it was a shouting match, literally shouting match.
Maha, has he done credit to the three Begums? Is there anything you could add? Do you feel very much the fourth Begum to be in his life?
I think I am.
I think so too. Can we have your reading?
Okay.
Zia is going to read a little bit from the book, and then we can have questions and answers.
Okay, let me just stand up for that. So this is the last section of the book. The book has the three Begums, one chapter each, and then there's an opening chapter called Before, and then there's an After. So the before and after, like a time wrap between the three Begums. So it covers a period. So this is after. So this is when the three Begums have died, and what happens afterwards. The three Begums died within 3 years without realizing their tamannas, arzus, their cherished desires. For me, 3 losses, one after another, all rolled into one giant trauma. How do you cope with such cumulative bereavements? You don't. In Muslim circles, your relatives and friends would hug you and utter one single word, sabr, have patience. But where does patience come from? How does one acquire it? Especially someone like me who has little patience to start with. What was it that Hamida said? You have so little patience that you came into the world 3 weeks early. Patience is something you need to avoid making hasty decisions that you may regret later on. It is something you need for long queues, traffic jams, that irritating child who keeps watching noisy cartoons on his smartphone. To master an art you are clearly incapable of mastering. It is something you need for living people, to build and enhance a relationship, to tolerate people who in reality should not be tolerated. But how do you have patience for those who are not here? You just cannot help missing them. Try as hard as you can. In some fragmented moments, I get the urge to stop working, go down from the attic and see what Hamida is up to, only to remember she is not there anymore. In other moments, I unconsciously ring Merryl on my mobile phone to ask a question that has been bothering me, and then I am jolted into recognition that she has passed away. How many nights I have turned in my bed to put my arms around Saliha, only to realize that she now sleeps with the earth as her duvet. Where does one find patience for such innately natural acts? Long-standing Western friends come and see you, put their hands on your arms, or call you, dropping the tone of their voice to say, "I am sorry for your loss." The sentence is often uttered in a matter-of-fact ritualistic way as a formality, which drains it of its meaning. At best, it expresses sympathy, suggesting they feel for me, as though I have a need for them to feel in a particular way. It may help if they feel with you, but how could they? It is an impossible ask. You appreciate their emotional intelligence, their concern for you. They imagine it makes you feel better. It does not. Or you need some help. What help can possibly provide? You realize it is not sympathy you want. You want a balm for your inner turmoil. You maintain a patina of normality and gracefully accept their condolences. They say time heals everything. It doesn't. Time is not a friend, but an adversary of grief. Time is dementia. It erases your memory, makes you forget, forces you to shed the segments of your life that make you a whole person. It does not ease your grief and pain. Loss of memory separates you from those you have lost. To keep their memory alive, you have to fight against time. You have to remember. You have to turn absence into presence.
That's just so beautiful. Yeah. That's just so beautiful.
Thank you.
There was a very interesting, I'll come to you for questions. It's a very interesting article in one of the Sunday magazines where a Japanese man of a certain age was grieving, I think for his wife, and he just wanted to talk to her. So he found an old telephone box, a disused telephone box, and an old telephone, and he put it in a place that meant something to them. And he started going there, picking up the phone and talking to her. Yeah. And this is now taken off around the world. Telephones are being set up, and it's called airphones or something. And people are really finding that, just getting into that box in a private space.
And just, remember. It's a form of remembrance.
Yeah, but talking to them, not about them. And I was just so struck that, yes, time doesn't heal. You have to find ways to keep that alive.
Yeah.
So true. This was beautiful. Thank you, Zia. Thank you so much for writing the book.
Thank you.
Thank you for the way you write. Thank you for being my friend.
I regret it sometimes, but never mind.
You forget me a lot.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Yasmin, for interrogating Zia so deftly. Probably the only person who could do it that way. Thank you so much. We have got time for anyone who would like to say anything, any contributions, any questions, continuations to the discussion. If Asim is going to pass around the microphone now, it's not going to amplify your voice, it's full of video recording. So if you just hold it in front of you, who would like to go first? We'll indicate, everyone will get a chance. Yes.
Thank you, Zia and Yasmin, for that. Just want to give a flavor of Merrill's way of thinking. I happened to be in India, and I was visiting the Indian Muslim Students Federation or something. We knock on the door, they open, and they're just about to kill me. I said, this issue of inquiry just come out, our magazine, Afkar Inquiry. What have you written there? Now, Merryl had written an article on women's rights, and she had called a lot of the Muslim scholars, including Maulana Maududi, that they are talking nonsense. Mm-hmm. Now, nonsense in India has a very deep, different meaning than what you would look at it in English language. Mm-hmm. And I said, my God, I wasn't there, I was traveling, so I hadn't edited it. I would have taken those out. I came back and I asked Merryl, I said, Merryl, you nearly killed me. She said, good for you, we need to educate these people. That's what I said.
Yeah, that generally we both got very ill by eating. Yeah, I remember that. But on that trip, me and Merryl hired an ambassador car, and we drove from. I don't know.
Ambassador is the old Indian
car. We drove all around. If the it was called Trunk Road number 1 or something, we drove all the way around, and it was a here. I came back and wrote an article for a book called Ambassador from India, in which I described that. I think it's in a book of, cars for fetishes or something like that. Yeah.
Thank you. I have to stand up, I'm afraid. I wanted to ask about. I think it's a very brave time to write a book like this. If you think about the circulation of misogyny in our contemporary societies and development of movements like involuntary celibates, what we're seeing with the proliferation of people like Andrew Tate and their influence on young men. I wanted to ask you, what advice would you give to young Muslim men growing up now about appreciating the Begums in their life?
Great question.
What advice I would give? Listen to your Begums, I would say. I suppose is the but it's something more than that. You can give all sorts of advice, right? You listen to them, appreciate them, show love, whatever. But it's how you innately relate to them. Is something much deeper than simply listening or talking. Sometimes the way my mother looked at me, right, destroyed me. There is one photograph of her where she's actually looking at me, and I specifically, it's framed in my house in a big, to kind of internalize that gaze. Because what that gaze is saying is, do you understand what I'm saying? And in most cases, you don't, right? So I think that is the essence, and that's what's missing. People do not know how to relate to their mothers, to their sisters, to their aunts, to the pupos, right? Who play and to their nannies, who play a very important part in shaping them. Right, I think, and that is missing. So just asking them to be nice or listening is not enough. You need that family web, of which the feminine is an absolutely essential part. In fact, in most cases, the dominant part. And I'm not talking about feminism. I'm talking about the feminine in the Ibn Arabi sense. In the Ibn Arabi sense, of which that feminism is a part, and the men have to show that feminine.
But it's complicated, because in many, many Muslim families, and I've been a journalist long enough and written about so many of them, it's very much there when it comes to the mother.
Yeah.
And it's not there when it comes to the wife. That is the honest truth. And if anything, there's a kind of exaggerated worship and respect for the mother matriarch.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is why I'm convinced so many Asian women, not just Muslim women, like my mother, desperately wanted to get old. to cross that barrier,
Where they have
and
their-
then they will be okay.
Yeah, they'll be made to
they
ex-
hope so she
they'll be
stopped
made to-
walking and moving at 40, I think.
Yeah,
so she
they'll
could
be
be
made to-
old,
Yeah.
and then she'd get this respect that
Yeah.
she never got as a brother.
Yeah.
So there, it's a quite a difficult
Yeah.
thing.
I agree,
But
I agree.
also the other thing to remember is that certainly Andrew Tate and his brother have become Muslims because they think Muslims keep their women in their places. Isn't that interesting? Their perceptions are so appalling.
Oh, hello. It's nice to Sonali Naik. I just wanted to, what you talked, your relationship with your mother reminded me of something my father used to say, which it really resounded just now, which was that he said, when a child looks at their mother, they feel happy, but when a mother looks at their child, they feel bliss. And that is the definition of bliss, and that's how he described it to me. And that photograph, I haven't seen it. If I have, I can't picture it, but I feel it just from how you've described it, and it just really resonated.
This is the one where you say she's in green.
Yes, yes. This is described in the thing. Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that was
in the
I just wanted
first
to
chapter, in the
share.
before
Yeah.
chapter described. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Anyone else?
No. Buy the book.
In terms of this very evocative, moving thing you said about time doesn't heal, it's so, so true. I lost my mother many, many years ago. I can honestly say to you, A, that I wouldn't have survived, never mind thrived, if she hadn't been there. My 2 siblings were destroyed by the family we had. I survived because I was the youngest and she protected me. But I cannot stop missing her. And you know, that's something so profound when you say that. I remember, do you remember Martin Jakes?
Yes.
Who we both used to know, and
Yeah.
he got married to a very young, very beautiful woman, and he actually met in Malaysia.
The Malaysian woman. Yeah, 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 yeah.
And
She's
of
Malaysian
Indian
Chinese.
origin.
Yeah.
And they had a child, and within a year of the child was a year old, and she in Hong Kong, they were there to see Eric Hobsbawm for New Year's Eve. She had an epileptic fit, and they took her to hospital, and they were very racist
You wrote about it, yeah.
towards Indian people, and they could have saved her, and she died. And Martin has never recovered. And I remember I used to phone him, and he said, "You're the only one who's phoning. It's only 4 weeks, and they've stopped phoning. They want me to get on with it. How am I supposed to get on with it?" And I would say, no, you can't get on with it, because this is grief you have to sort of accommodate now, like a bad arm or a,
It's a kind of
weak
halo
heart.
you carry with you. Yeah.
And he said, that's such a different way of
Yeah.
thinking about it
Yeah.
than in the West, when
Yeah.
a time comes and that's it. Which is extremely cruel, I think, for people who can't live by that very practical way of you get over it. Any other, Maha, do you want to say anything about the 3 women in your dad's life? What do you remember?
I just remember how the 3 of them just interacted. I mean, you asked the question, or did Mum feel jealous of Merrill? And it's a very interesting question, but I just loved the way that there was so much synergy between these 3 amazing, beautiful women. And at one stage, all 3 of them were living in the family home. So, it's quite difficult to have 3 dominant women, 3 very different women in one household. But we managed, and we all got along so well. And yeah, they shaped my life, obviously, equally, just as, Dad is saying that they shaped his. And it's interesting about grief. I try and carry them with me wherever I go. I'm often thinking about them, constantly missing them. In some ways, I have probably more conversations with them now after their deaths, because I'm always thinking about them in everything that I do and talking to them. So the interesting thing that you were saying about the conversation in the phone box, well, I have that conversation with my mum, with Merrill, with my grandmother all the time. I speak out loud to them. When I'm doing things, I ask my mum, would you be proud of me? Or, my brother got married recently, and I was quite a big part of the wedding, trying to organise things and constantly talking to my mum in that process, or you'd really like this, mum, or did you like the fact that I did this? Or, so I have these conversations with them all the time now. So in some senses, I feel like I'm still getting to know them, or know more about them now after they passed away. So that, for me, that relationship hasn't ended. It's a continuous relationship,
can it?
And it will never end. Exactly.
How do you feel about all this? Yes, you.
Well, I think I just echo my sister said, to be honest. I think she's put it so eloquently, so I'm not sure if I could add that many words, because what she said was so beautiful. But I think what I'd say is, particularly my mother, I think she was so nurturing when I was younger, and I think our relationship, it meant so much to me, even though I'd probably say I'm not the most expressive person in the world. But the thing is, one of the things that I do remember actually, when she was ill and she had cancer, and there was a particularly fraught experience, and I said, "Mum, I love you," with tears in my eyes. And my mum wouldn't, again, she wasn't necessarily the most expressive either. She was a very stoic character, highly resilient, and as my dad said, very determined as well. So we wouldn't necessarily say "I love you" to each other particularly often, but I think afterwards she spoke to perhaps my sister or my cousin and said, "That's the first time that I've heard Zayn say that." I think the response was, "But have you said that to him?" But I'm glad that we managed to, I think, express very overtly our love for each other, had that quality time when she was ill, because I think that relationship was, in many ways, it didn't need or require expression, because there was a level of intimacy. But again, I think I'm glad that at the end, I managed to articulate. It's really a very difficult thing to do. I think my sister's certainly very good at it, but I don't think me or my brother are very good at that. I think we take that character trait from our father, as we've.
Well, it's amazing.
I think we've certainly heard today about his masculine and anti-feminist side. I joke, I jest, of course, but.
No, you're
but I remember her talking to me about the boys once, and she said, "All I want is for them to find lovely wives, and I just want them to get married."
And I've been resisting that for some time.
I'm sure she was there. I'm sure she was there because she kept saying that, because my son had got married, and she said, "Oh, aren't you lucky?" And that's what I want. And she must have been there, surely.
Yeah, and just to, I think, reiterate my dad said, and also in the book as well, Merrill, in particular, the relationship that we had with each of the siblings was very special. So I think my nickname was Bodge. And I remember distinctly the faxes that she used to send on our birthdays. And I think just the level of articulation in those messages were extraordinary. I think the verbosity of them is something that I distinctly remember. And I think there's probably a side of my character which she has kind of been able to shape quite indelibly.
It's quite a remarkable thing, this. A Welsh woman comes into your lives.
The voice of BBC Wales, I'd imagine, yeah.
Yes, and becomes completely assimilated in the faith, in the culture. It is quite a remarkable story. I mean, it happens, of course it happens a lot. And historically we know that in this country there were many families that became Muslim or had a Muslim, but the level of her becoming one of you was completely exceptional, I think. And I wonder if it had anything to do with her Methodism or her original capacity for faith and love?
Yeah, I mean, she came from a chapel background, so that was always there. I think that there was enormous capacity for love right from the beginning.
But the openness, and she took it on, didn't she?
Yeah, the faxes that used to come. I mean, I think I produced 1 or 2 faxes in the book, but the faxes, we used to look forward to them because they were incredible.
I mean, they're extraordinary documents.
But
they need to be in a museum somewhere.
Incomprehensible too, because there are words I've never seen in my life before.
Yeah.
These must be the nicknames of the
Yeah,
private
nicknames,
language.
yeah.
On your point about her giving up, becoming a big part of our family, I think what we have to remember is that Merrill never married, and she didn't have children of her own. So we were, in fact, her family.
That's
We
they
were her
children.
children. And so it's interesting what Zan says about having that conversation with my mum about articulating "I love you." So my mum, as my dad has said in the book, and as many people already know, lived a life of service, right? We knew she loved us because of the things that she did for us.
Yeah.
As with many sort of South Asian mothers, right? My dad and I had a conversation about this, and my dad said, it's a very Western thing to say, I love you all the time. We show you with everything that we do. We live, your mum was devoted to you, devoted her whole life to you, and of course that's true. But with Merrill, she was very much the opposite in that sense, in that she was very articulate with how she felt about us, and she'd always say to us that she loved us.
How interesting.
Yeah, so we had the best of both worlds. We had my mum who absolutely devoted her life to us in everything she did was for us, right? So there's no question of whether she loved us or not, of course, it goes without saying. It was only in her final days that she actually said the words, With Merrill, she would say it all the time to us. She was very articulate in how she felt, very affectionate, very loving, with the nicknames, with the writing letters, all of that stuff, with the attention that she gave us. So we were so lucky to have 3 mothers. And then, of course, the relationship that grandchildren have with their grandparents is a very special one, So the way that my grandmother was with her own children is not how she was with us, for example. Yeah. So my dad would probably say, and my aunt and my uncle would probably say that my grandmother probably wasn't very affectionate towards them. But we all had a very different experience. My grandmother was very affectionate to all of us. So
but it is this capacity for some families also. So as I said, I grew up in a very unhappy household, mostly because of my father. And my mother had to do 3 jobs, and we were really, really poor. I didn't even have my own bed till I was 12. But we lived next door to a Sunni family, and she was a proper matriarch. The Swahili name for her was Mama Kuba, which means big mother. And she'd been through 4 marriages and had various children. And she smoked constantly, players, cigarettes. And the 4 husbands provided her with money, ration, And she completely adopted us, my mother and I. And we were part of her. So her children used to call me Didi. They still call me Didi. They're living in Bolton. I haven't seen them for years. Yassi Didi. And this capacity, and we are Shias, and we're even the edge of Shiaism, I mean, Ismaili. She just was non-judgmental, my grandmother. And it's really lovely when there is this capacity for people, families to absorb somebody on the outside. And she was horrible to her daughters-in-law, really horrible. But she was fabulous with me. So you're selfish when you're a child.
Because there was too many Bollywood films in which it is essential for mother-in-law to be horrible to the daughter-in-law. So they just kind of perpetuate that myth.
Well, this has been so lovely, and I would have never expected you to have written such an emotionally open book. So thank you for that. I think it'll speak to a lot of people, and you should definitely buy it. And if nobody has any final questions, is that okay?
Yes, of course. Yes. So,
Well, thank you.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you to everyone. We're just going to take a 5-minute break while we turn around, and then we're going to launch Critical Muslim Water.
But Critical Muslim is all about rethinking not just Islam, but rethinking a religion in a contemporary world, and how do we relate to what is going on in terms of values, in terms of our issues, in terms of climate change, artificial intelligence, the virus, or what have you. We've been going almost 13 years, which is a prime number, but it's also a very long time. And there are 4 issues a year. As you can see, each issue is a paperback book, and each issue is devoted to a theme. And we've had many themes in the past: beauty, artificial, futures. Some of the themes coming up will be things like fascism, fire. We've done water, so we're going to do fire in a couple of times, journalism. And each theme is covered not just with articles, intellectual articles and essays, but also in fiction, in poetry, sometimes even in book reviews. And we have also a list at the end, which also kind of includes the stuff on the theme. When we started it, we wanted to model it on Grantha, so it still has that Grantha feeling, but not quite in the sense that Grantha just does long essays. We also do reviews, and there's a lot of criticism and counter-criticism in that sense. Essentially, if you really want to know not just the Muslim perspective, but different perspectives on a contemporary issue, like water, or fascism, or liberalism, which is the next issue, you ought to be reading Critical Muslim. Otherwise, we have also done an issue on ignorance.
And fear and loathing.
And fear and loathing.
Okay, so thank you, Zia. I'm going to introduce, I'm going to ask Naomi to speak first, read first. I'm going to introduce you first. Naomi Foyle is a British-Canadian poet, a science fiction novelist, an essayist, and a theatre maker. Naomi's debut novel, Seoul Survivors, a cyber thriller set in South Korea, was published in 2013. She is author of the Gaia Chronicles, an eco-science fiction quartet set in a post-fossil fuel Mesopotamia. Naomi has written 10 poetry pamphlets and 4 full collections. Her latest collection of poetry, Salt and Snow, has just been published by Waterloo Press. Naomi is also the co-founder of British Writers in Support of Palestine, and is a vocal advocate for the boycott, disinvestment and sanctions campaign against Israel. Naomi teaches critical writing at the University of Chichester and is the poetry and fiction editor of Critical Muslim. Naomi.
Thank you, Hassan, and thank you so much to Zia and everyone at Muslim Institute for welcoming me into the journal, into your community. I was brought up a Quaker, and I've just, ever since I met all of you at the Winter Gathering and events like this, I've just strongly felt that my values and my spirituality resonate with yours. And my involvement at Critical Muslim has been a wonderful avenue for me into different aspects of Islam, of which I was completely oblivious before I met you all. So thank you for that. And thank you to Zia for demanding and haranguing me to write this essay. I really tried to wriggle out of it, but he wasn't having it, and I'm really glad I did. It wasn't for any particular reason of the theme. I love the theme. It was just a particular time of year. But I fit it in, and here it is. I'm not going to start from the beginning. It's called Water as Metaphor, and the introduction will probably be a bit dry. So I'm going to read a couple of shorter sections, and if they don't quite flow into each other, I'll try and bridge them. So, water as metaphor. In chapter 8 of the classic Taoist text, the Tao Te Ching, traditionally thought to have been composed by the semi-legendary 6th century sage Lao Tzu, water is appointed the highest of virtues. This is no whimsical honour. As contemporary Tao author Derek Lin summarises, water has 7 specific virtues we should learn to emulate. First, water always seeks the lowest ground, reminding us to be humble. It is also an element with hidden depths, and depth is a quality to be prized in a person's character. Water is kind as well, giving unconditionally as it travels, with no expectations. When calm, it reflects its surroundings with perfect fidelity, inspiring us to speak the truth with peace and integrity. In administering itself to all things equally, water is courteous and just. Perhaps its greatest capability is its versatility. Water is flexible, can change both direction and form. And finally, water has a heavenly sense of timing. As rain, snow, delta flood, or low tide, its appearance varies according to seasonal and cosmological rhythms, reminding us of the vital importance of balance and appropriate action. But though our personal lives might be happier if we learned the lessons of war, how powerful are its virtues in the face of war? We now live in a world the rich won. The major global powers, increasingly governed by fascists, billionaires, and genocidaires, clearly intent on starting World War III and destroying the planet we live on. How effective is it to be flexible, courteous, and kind in the face of rapacious greed and hatred and the threat of mass annihilation? So later in the essay, I argue that while activism, of course, relies on data and analysis, changing facts on the ground ultimately requires changing people's hearts and minds, and to do this requires a synergetic, and here is water again, fluid process of overcoming polarization by negotiating difference. Such is the challenge faced by binational groups in Palestine-Israel, combatants for peace, former fighters engaged in non-violent resistance to the occupation, the Parents' Circle Family Forum, bereaved members of both communities who promote truth, dialogue, and reconciliation, Standing Together, which is Israeli and Palestinian citizens of Israel working together, who, while criticized for some poor political choices over the last year and a half, have organized regular demonstrations calling for ceasefire throughout the genocide and have protected aid trucks from settler violence. All these groups and others demonstrate that without denying the imbalance of power between them, Palestinians and Israelis can find common ground and work together for a just peace. It must be terribly hard at times to bridge the gulf of experience that lies between the occupier and the occupied, but such peace builders aim to cultivate a faith in our shared humanity that can overcome even very difficult differences. As it says in the Quran, and the 2 seas, i.e. the 2 kinds of water in the earth, are not alike. This fresh, sweet, good to drink, this bitter, salt. And from them both you eat fresh meat and derive the ornaments that you wear. And you see the ships cleaving them with its prow, that you may seek of his bounty, and that perhaps you may give thanks. Surah 35:12. Truly, freedom lies between the river and the sea.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Naomi. Thank you. I'd like now to introduce Alibhai Adil. Is a writer, an artist, an academic whose work dives into memory, identity, and the experience of being between cultures. Her poetry and essays explore the personal and political and have been featured in anthologies, taught in universities across the UK, US, and Europe, and praised by leading critics in post-colonial literature. Alibhai has performed and exhibited at places like Tate Britain and the British Museum, and her artwork is both in private collections and the State Collection of Cyprus. Alongside her creative work, Alibhai has held senior academic roles in the UK, led MA programmes in film and creative writing, and co-edited the anthology Nicosia Beyond Barriers, reimagining her divided hometown. She also reviews literary fiction for the Times Literary Supplement and is part of the editorial board for Critical Muslim as a reviews editor. Alif, over to you.
Thank you so much. It's so lovely to be here celebrating Zia's very moving and wonderful book and to be included and to be launching CM. I guess you're all readers. As Hassan said, I'm an artist as well as a writer, and one of the things that's so lovely about CM is the quality of visuals. And a lot of the stories and memoir essays and things I've published, I always include illustrations with them. And Zia is so wonderful and generous and always says, as many as you want. I say, how many am I allowed? As many as you want, which is so lovely. And I'm being tiresome, but he included one at the very beginning of things. Oh, that's lovely, lovely, lovely. And I wrote a story called Drowned World, which is kind of about Cyprus and the sea. And when we think about Cyprus, we think, oh, it's a lovely holiday island. It's the best place of Aphrodite. Well, actually, Aphrodite is also Astarte, and Astarte is coming to us from Tyre, and Sidon is coming from where the genocide is now happening. And both Astarte and then her later Hellenic version, Aphrodite, are the goddess of war as well as love, of fear as well as... So she is a very powerful force that's kind of been depilated and deposed in the Hellenic canon, and then as we go along into sort of something that we put on chocolate boxes and Botticelli, but it's another far more feral force. And also another thing that was inspiring me was that some of the crazy people around Atlantis, the city of Atlantis, theorized that Cyprus was, is the highest point of what remains of Atlantis that sunk under the sea, Plato's Atlantis. Was it real? Was it not? And then the thing that most concerned me when I was thinking about the sea and Cyprus was that actually it's a graveyard now. It's a graveyard of refugees. So we think of it as a lovely holiday place, so I'm going on holiday as well. So this story is called Drowned World, and it's about an academic who goes to give a paper on Atlantis, but on Atlantis as metaphor for othering and war, at a conference in Cyprus. And I'm just going to read you the beginning bit, and I hope that you're going to read the rest of the story. I woke up early with a start, suddenly evicted from a dream, as though compelled by a forgotten task or someone calling me. Villa Anero was situated on a small cliff just above the beach. My room had full-length sliding doors and a clear view of the empty beach directly below. It was dark, the sun had not yet risen, and the sea was a flickering expanse of pewter and mercury, flecked with moon silver, edged with an extravaganza of lace white foam. Only the wind. No one was calling. But then, from a distance, I saw a figure rising out of the sea. I wrapped myself in a blanket against the early morning January chill and slid open the glass doors to the garden to take a closer look. A naked woman was rising out of the sea, walking towards the shore. She was walking slowly, calm and determined, her long dark hair plastered over her face and breasts. But she must be several kilometres away, surely. Although my sense of distance and scale aren't particularly sharp, she seemed huge to me, though far away, not of a human scale at all. I watched as the sun rose behind her, a muted pearlescent light, until drizzle drove me back into my room. I was the first guest in the breakfast room half an hour before the service began. A lone waiter was setting up heated chafing dishes of scrambled eggs and bacon. I'm sorry, it's too early, he informed me as he waved his hand to indicate that there were baskets of butter in tiny plastic pats and miniature jars of jam, bowls of olives and platters of halloumi and sliced tomatoes to be arranged in a suitable still life before the stage was set for breakfast. There's a woman on the beach, I said. Please, can you look? There's something strange about her. Without even looking up, he shook his head. I don't see anything, he said. Nothing. I went to the patio. She was advancing steadily towards the shore, her monumental thighs gleaming grey, white, like wet marble. By the time I returned inside, the waiter had gone to be replaced by a young woman whose painted eyebrows resembled acute accents, a diacritical decoration that gave her a permanently quizzical and cross expression, even when she smiled as I approached her. There's something outside, please come with me. I took her elaborately manicured hand and pulled her towards the patio. Her voice is high, calm and sweet as we survey the empty beach under the faint drizzle. It's very beautiful, yes? Would you like coffee or tea? The woman on the beach had disappeared entirely. Thank you.
Thank you. So, if you want to find out what happens next,
That's the idea. That's the idea.
That's not right. Then please, at the back of the room are Critical Muslims and Zia's book on sale, and I'm sure the contributors and Zia will do signing for you if you want to purchase your copies. And I'd like to wrap up the evening and say thank you to everyone. Thank you to everyone who's contributed, and thank you so much. And thank you most of all to all of you for coming out to this evening. Thank you.